Okay.
Done.
Great. Thank you all for coming this morning. I'm Brian Wingfield with Forbes magazine here in DC. I want to welcome you to our policy roundtable on entrepreneurship. It's sponsored by the Consumer Electronics Association and the Kauffman Foundation. It's part of CEA's innovation movement. And we have an excellent panel this morning from a range of industry folks and Washington folks who can talk about entrepreneurship. I just want to very quickly introduce everybody, and then we'll get the panel started. Down at the far end, we have Jake Sigal, who's the founder and CEO of Livio Radio. Then Michael Beirne, who's the founder of Voice of Entrepreneurs. Then next to him, we have John Backus, who is the founder and managing partner of New Atlantic Ventures. Gary Shapiro, president and CEO of the Consumer Electronics Foundation. And then next to me is Bob Litan, who's the vice president for research and policy at the Kauffman Foundation. So I just want to start things off very briefly this morning and getting you guys to tell a little bit about what you do. And I'm going to try to avoid the sun here, so forgive me if I'm backed up a little bit. But I want you to just kind of go around and talk about the things that you think are most important for entrepreneurs. And the first general question is, what is the biggest policy challenge facing entrepreneurs today? And Bob, maybe we can start that off with you.
Okay, so first let me give a commercial, a few factoids, and then I'll answer your question.
Okay.
Commercial is that Kauffman is in the midst of the 4th annual sponsorship of Global Entrepreneurship Week. There are 40,000 events around the world celebrating it this week. 103 countries and over 10 million people are involved. This started from almost nothing about 4 years ago, and the whole purpose of it is to raise awareness of entrepreneurship. And so this leads to my factoids, and that is we couldn't be doing this at a better time. The economy, well, I don't have to tell you, is semi-stuck in a rut. We're struggling to recover, and it's been our view at Kauffman all along that the key to the recovery lies in entrepreneurship, and specifically new firms, not necessarily small firms, but new firms. We have a wealth of research on our website that we have done, and also research that we've sponsored, which documents that virtually all net new jobs between the late 1970s and up until the Great Recession were created by firms less than 5 years old. So that basically tells you that existing firms on net created no jobs. So all the dynamism in the American economy over the last 3 decades is new, new, new. And so if we're going to get out of this recession and going to have a sustained recovery and have more jobs, we're going to have to have a policy environment that's going to foster the creation of new firms and their growth. There's another reason we want new firms, and that is there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that new firms disproportionately form and introduce disruptive technologies. So if you think of the airplane, the car, computers, small and big, software to run them, internet search, the list goes on. All the major disruptive technologies, I would assert, not all, but certainly a substantial portion of them, were introduced by entrepreneurs and not by existing businesses. And it's disruptive technologies that drive productivity growth, that drive standard of living, and make modern life what it is today. So we wouldn't all be here enjoying, essentially, even the internet that we're now talking about, if it weren't for new firms. So now I'll give you my one policy that I would advocate, because we decided beforehand that we're all not going to repeat the same thing. I'm going to give you my one policy, if I could play king for the day, that I would advance. It doesn't cost a dime, so there's no federal stimulus money in this. There's no increase in the deficit, and it's a very simple idea, is to change our immigration laws. And I'll even concede that we're not going to even go and do the obvious thing, which is to give green cards to all the foreign kids who come here to American universities and graduate. There are 125,000 of them every year, and we do the stupidest thing possible. We send them home after they get a degree. There couldn't be a dumber policy on earth, but sure enough, that's what we do. All right. Now, politically, I know that it's probably unrealistic, given the current xenophobia about immigrants, to even change that and give these people a green card. So I have a fallback, and this is something that we've been pushing at the foundation. It's a startup visa. And it's not the startup visa that Senator Kerry and Senator Lugar have proposed, which is a good first step, but really is a very limited proposal. And what their idea is, it's to say that if you're a foreign resident and you come into the United States with $250,000 or more of venture capital backing or angel capital backing, you get a temporary and then eventually a green card if you get over 10 employees. We would not tie the entrepreneur's visa to money. We tie it to jobs. And so what we would say is that there could be a series of gates. You could first get a temporary visa by opening a business. Once you hire at least one non-family member, you get to stay here for 5 years. Once you get up to something like 5 or 10 employees, you're here forever, all right? And there's an enormous pool from which we would draw. So we're not talking about letting in everybody from all over the world. We'd start with all the H-1Bs. There are 1 million of these people, all right, that have to go back after 6 years. Again, dumb, but nonetheless, let's at least give them a chance to stay. If they can form a business, then they can go on this pathway to success. And obviously, the second pool from which we would draw are all those foreign students. And again, if they start a business and then eventually employ other people, that will be a way to stay. We make a conservative estimate on our website and our studies, and we've written op-eds to this effect. We think by just this one change in immigration laws, we'd have 100,000 new businesses right off the bat. And these are 100,000 businesses that create jobs, all right? In fact, for the marketers in the room, I would not even call this an entrepreneur's visa. I would call it a job creator's visa. And I cannot believe anybody sensible can oppose this. Right? Even people who are opposed to immigration would be hard-pressed to oppose a visa that leads to more jobs. I'll end my sermon.
Great, thanks, Bob. Just want to make sure we all get a chance. Gary, can you batter up, I guess?
I can. I agree with everything you said. It's great. Gary Shapiro, Consumer Electronics Association. We are a nonprofit trade association of about 2,000 companies, American companies, both in the manufacturing side and the distribution side of consumer electronics. We own and produce the largest trade event in the Americas, the Consumer Electronics Show. It's held each January in Las Vegas. We get about 125,000 people there, including 25,000 people from abroad. 80% of our members and 80% of our exhibitors are small businesses. The entire event, the trade show, is run with the concept that any entrepreneur, any innovator with an idea, for a very small investment of a couple $1,000s can expose it to literally 125,000 people who could provide financing, retailers who could buy it, media who will cover it. And that's how we run our organization, the event. We are passionate as an organization, and I have to say I have yet to find a CEO who disagrees, who's a member of ours, that our country is in huge trouble, and for a whole variety of reasons. And the only thing that will save us, we have become the slow growth country, by the way, in the world, along with perhaps Western Europe. But the rest of the world is faster growing. The money is shifting elsewhere. And the only thing that will save us, frankly, is if we focus on innovation. Innovation does come, in large part, from entrepreneurs. It also comes from large companies like Apple that create a product where there's a lot of apps created for it. Those apps creators are entrepreneurs. So innovation comes from all sorts, but the government can do a lot of different things. We have something called the Innovation Movement. It's attracted 100,000 Americans who basically believe that innovation is important. And among the precepts that I'll talk about, one of them is just simply the concept of free trade and trade agreements, which again is more unpopular perhaps right now than even immigrant visas. Because, but the fact is the rest of the world is totally passing us by as the Panama, Colombia, and Korea free trade agreements are languishing. The EU, so many other countries, the Asian countries are all establishing free trading zones among themselves, cutting deals with countries like Panama and Colombia, and we've just gone into neutral the last few years, and the rest of the world's passing us by. Yet the president has said he wants to double exports. You can't double exports without trade. So trade is something that I have been volunteered, but I'm as passionate as you are about what you believe. Immigrants are our future. It's who we are.
John?
Okay. John Backus, New Atlantic Ventures. So I'm with the Venture Capital Fund based in Reston, Virginia. We also have an office in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The message I'd like to leave you with is that venture capital is a small industry, but it is the rocket fuel that powers these small businesses that I call high potential small businesses. A small business that has potential to hire 100 people, 1,000 people, and grow and really dominate this economy. A statistic a lot of people may not know is that companies that were once venture-backed or are venture-backed today account for 21% of GDP. They account, depending on how you measure it, for between 11% and 14% of all jobs in America today. Yet our industry is tiny. Last year, there were 76 venture firms that raised a fund. They raised $10 to $15 billion total. Compare that to the stimulus bill and what we spend in Washington on a daily basis here. Those companies, that 76, by the way, is the smallest number of new venture funds that have been raised since 1993. So our industry is under attack from a lot of different places, and I'll talk about that later on in the panel discussion. But what I'd like to leave you with is the leverage potential in a venture capital fund. So our fund, New Atlantic Ventures, has 9 employees. We have today $200 and some million under management. Over the last 15 years, we have backed entrepreneurs that have started 100 companies. Those 100 companies have created over 10,000 jobs, the bulk of which are in the United States. We have 25 active companies today. We have 7 companies, new companies, that we funded this year, since January of this year. And we're a 9-person group that, with not a lot of money, has created 10,000 jobs, through our investments in these companies over the last 15 years. Yet, as we look at, what Sarbanes-Oxley has helped do to the IPO market, which is, making a moribund market out there, as we look at the regulation that's coming from the Dodd-Frank bill, as we look at the fact that they're going to require a lot of financial institutions to no longer invest in our asset class. We look at carried interest tax legislation that is looking to increase by a factor of 2 the tax rates on what we do as venture capitalists. Our average holding, we invest in a company, we hold it for 7 to 10 years. So we're not flipping assets out there. So my one policy prescription, if I were to offer something for you to look at, I'll say 2 things. One is, don't make a change in carried interest legislation. It may look like the low-hanging fruit, but our industry has already shrunk by half in the last 10 years. We've gone from 1,300 venture capital firms down to fewer than 650. Let's not shrink it further. The second thing, if you want to think broadly and expansively, and I think we could do this on a revenue neutral basis, is I would change the way we define capital gains. And what I do is expand the holding period for short-term capital gains and expand the period for long-term capital gains, but lower the rate. So for example, instead of rewarding someone for holding an asset and flipping it in a year and getting a lower tax rate, change that holding period to 3 years. But put a rate out there that says, if you hold an asset, whether it's your house, whether it's a stock, whether you started a company, for 7 years or 10 years, you should have a 0% rate or a 5% rate. So look at encouraging long-term behavior instead of short-term behavior.
Great, thanks. Mike?
Yeah, I'm definitely got to agree with that. I hate when panels. So I said I agree
What he
with
said.
My name's Mike Beirne. I'm a parallel investor and entrepreneur. I've actually run an angel investor network called the Acceleration Group and invested in several small companies. A lot of companies that are service businesses that aren't don't get to the range where a venture capital firm like John's would invest. But I would say that we go out there and find a lot of these companies that help feed the funnel that feed into the venture capital world. So angels and VCs work pretty well together. I'm actually here representing a relatively new trade association. Hopefully you all hear a lot more about in the next couple of years, but it's called the Voice of Entrepreneurs. And I basically never had an aspiration to start a trade association. I used to be on the Hill when I was in my reserve unit, but didn't really have a yearning desire to come back here. But with Voice of Entrepreneurs, I started it because the Dodd-Frank bill that John was talking about had a provision in there that would have basically raised a floor of wealth criteria for an angel investor from $1 million to $3.2 million, give or take. The numbers fluctuated, but about $3 million. Basically, it would have eliminated 80% of the likely angel investor pool. Okay, it would have been devastating for my core business. I got involved and realized when I started speaking to some folks, managed to speak to some folks over on the other side of the Hill, on the Senate side, and worked with folks like Senator Brown's team, and we actually had an impact on helping amend that bill to change that. And in one sense, I thought, okay, that's really pretty cool. I got involved in some legislation, and we had a change. But then the echo that hit me pretty hard was, wow, there was nobody in here representing entrepreneurs at all in this situation. So what came out of that is I talked to lots of the other entrepreneur organizations and decided there was still a gap. I think, Bob, you'd agree that there's a gap for educating and involving legislators in where the entrepreneur's mindset is and how we would react to things and how we would help be part of the problems, the solutions to the problems. My main point to your question